Okay, so class, we are going to be reading To Kill a Mockingbird. And I created this presentation for you just to give you a little background information on when it took place, when the story is being said to take place, some historical background, and also a little bit about the author and her life story. So please, while you're watching this, I expect you to be taking notes. There's a graphic organizer that I uploaded to our Google Classroom, so please be filling that out just to keep you on track while you're watching this presentation. And it's also important because when you come to class next time, we will be discussing what you learned after watching this. So here we go. Maybe. Here we go. So, a few facts about this novel. To Kill a Mockingbird was written by Harper Lee, and it was published in 1960. So just kind of start thinking about what do you know about what was going on in the 60s. The story, though, itself actually takes place in the 30s in the South. So back about 30 years. This book is very well known. It's a Pulitzer Prize winner, and it's popular. It was popular then when it was published, and it's still popular today. A little bit about the author. Her real name is Nell Harper Lee. She was born in 1926 in Monroeville, Alabama. Our story also takes place in a small town in Alabama. She was not your typical little girl growing up in that time period. She was definitely a tomboy. And her best friend, Truman, who also became a famous author, I believe, he was not your typical little boy. He was a little bit more sensitive. And so Nell, she stood up for him a lot when they were growing up because the other boys would pick on him. So that was kind of the dynamics of their friendship. And both kids, they both had struggles at home. Truman didn't live with his parents. He was actually raised by some other relatives because his parents just didn't want to take care of him. Nell, Harper, her mom was a stay-at-home mom, but she also suffered from some mental illness. I didn't read a whole bunch into that, but her mom did have some other things going on with her. Her dad was a big influence in her life, and especially in her writing. He was a state legislator and a county lawyer in their town. And one of the cases that he tried relates a lot to the novel. In this case that he defended two black men who were accused of murdering a white storekeeper. So just kind of keep that in mind. It may play a role later on. So now stepping back a little bit, what was going on in America? So the story was written in 1960, but it took place in the 30s. So taking place in the 30s, the Civil War had ended about 70 years ago. So it had ended about 70 years ago. The Emancipation Proclamation that freed slaves, it was signed in 1863 by Abraham Lincoln. However, in the South, it was not implemented until about 2 years later. So interesting there how even though it was signed and it said these slaves are free, that did not happen right away. And even after it was implemented in the South, it didn't mean free did not mean equal. And that's where we get into the Jim Crow laws, which you should have already talked about in like your history classes, where segregation really still had a major impact. Even though you still remember the pictures of the two drinking fountains. Yes, they had drinking fountains, but were they the same? No. So being free, having the same rights, didn't really mean the same thing. So racism in the South. A few interesting things that I found when I was doing research for this. One was between 1882, so just a little bit after the Civil War ended, in 1951, over 3,000 blacks were lynched. And in the 1960s, racial tensions, they were still high. So this is after even the story was taking place. This is when Harper Lee was writing the stories. Racial tensions were still very, very high. This is around the time of the Civil Rights Movement. And it was considered immoral, dangerous, and even ungodly for races to mix. Just think about that. I mean, even today there may be people who are a little weary about that happening, but back then it was considered immoral, dangerous, and ungodly. The view of interracial relationships. So, black men would be lynched if they raped a white woman. And what was interesting, I did a little bit extra research, but if you were a white person and you raped someone, you never received the death penalty. I'm not exactly sure what your penalty was, but it was never death. However, if you were black and you raped a woman, you were lynched. Whites viewed black men as sexual predators towards white women. And it was okay if a black man and if a white man and a black woman were together, but if a black man and a white woman were together, like wanted to get married, that was not acceptable at all. Finally, one case that I found that I had never heard of before that was very, very interesting, called the Scottsboro case of 1931. So this would be about the same time as what's going on in To Kill a Mockingbird, and this also happened in Alabama. So there were 9 black teenagers. They were on a train, on a freight train, going through Alabama, and they were looking for work. There were also some other white boys on the train too, and they ended up getting into a fight. The white boys were thrown from the train, and so they went and they found the police and told them what had happened. And so the police, they stopped the train, and they got the group of the black teenagers, and were going to take them and arrest them for assault. They were going to be put in jail for assault, but it didn't stop there. So also on the train were these 2 white women, but they were dressed as boys. And while they were on the train, they had had sexual relations with some of the white men. And so these women were worried that they would get in trouble for having sex with these white men. So they accused the black teenagers of raping them. What's interesting, there was no evidence that the black boys had raped these women. But there was, when this went to trial, there was an all-white jury, and so they sentenced every single black teenager to death except for one of the boys. So that was just definitely one of the stories that really stuck out to me, and I want you to take this, and this definitely will apply to Kill a Mockingbird as we read it. So, before class, you should have already watched this Prezi, obviously, if you are to this point. And I hope you should have completed the notes that I gave to you that you could find on Google Classroom. And if you need to, please go back through and we'll just watch the slides again just to make sure you got everything in. But I really want you to think about what you learned, some questions that you have, because we're going to be talking about this tomorrow in class. And bring this handout with you. You can post it to the classroom, but I want you to also have a physical copy so that we can talk about it. And just think about some of the things, what stood out to you, what surprised you. I definitely was surprised as I heard about these stories and statistics and everything. So please do that, and then also read the first chapter of To Kill a Mockingbird. And I want you to kind of make predictions based on what you learned from this presentation, what you already knew, whether it was from class or just other readings you had done, and then also from just reading the first chapter, how you think this is going to play out. So make sure you have all those things ready for class tomorrow, and I will see you then. And here are some sources, also great if you want to go back through. There were some great other pictures, like on Time and PBS. There were some good stories about Harper Lee, and then also some other cases around that time. So thank you, and I will see you tomorrow.